our session for today, we are going to have a brief introduction about our speaker for today. Our speaker for today is Mr. C.Y. Saw Chuan Yen. He is currently the Chartered Market Technician Charter holder. I'm not quite sure whether you know what is this particular position about. In Malaysia, we have less than 5 CMP. So technically, he's very, very experienced in terms of this, and he has near to 10 years of trading experience in local and international stocks and futures. He is also a certified master trainer of neuro-linguistic programming. I'm not quite sure whether you heard before NLP. So technically, NLP, if you can understand, is they know really about psychology, how mindset works. So in terms of trading, they are very good at trading psychology and trading mindset as well. So besides that, CY is also a performance coach with an extensive experience in coaching individuals. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to CY. CY, your turn.
Okay, please hold on. Let me share my screen up first. I think I have shared my screen up already. Can you see my screen? So if you can see my screen, can you give a thumbs up so that I know that my screen is already up? And hi, everyone. Good evening. So as we know that in Bursa Malaysia derivative, we have several futures products to trade like the FKLI, FCPO, and FM70. So I believe most people are more familiar with FKLI because it is directly related to the stock market. However, when it comes to trading FCPO, it is literally different from how you are going to trade FKLI. So today, this topic, we will be focusing primarily on the FCPO, the futures crude palm oil. So as we know, FKLI and FCPO are different. So the fundamentals would be different as well, meaning those factors that affect FKLI, those factors that affect the stock market will not necessarily affect FCPO. And the opposite is true, is that those factors that affect FCPO may not necessarily affect FKLI as well. And most importantly, how you trade FCPO is different from trading FKLI. So regardless of whether you are currently already trading FCPO or not yet and wish to trade FCPO someday, then this webinar is definitely right for you. Now, by the end of this session, you will understand what are the 5 key fundamental factors that affect FCPO directly so that you can customize as well as tailor your trading strategies according to different markets that you trade. Now, before I begin, let me do a quick disclaimer where, of course, this session is on for educational purpose only, and there is no investment advice involved. Although there are some, later on, we have some examples that is actually using the real market. So we will be using that as practice questions for you to understand how does the fundamental actually work in the FCPO market. Now, I believe Ting Ting has already introduced me. I don't have to introduce myself again. Now, first thing is that, can you let me know which of these methods you use in trading FCPO? Now, because, of course, when it comes to trading, there are fundamental analysis, which we call the FA, as well as a technical analysis, which is the FA. So can you let me know which of these methods that you currently using in trading the FCPO? Do you use FA or TA? So if you use TA, you can type in TA, and if you use FA, you can use type in FA. And if you use both, you can type in both as well. So let me know which of these methods that you are currently using to trade the market, so that I know how majority of you would actually trade the market. So I see a majority of you is actually using TA. Of course,
you can see that it's across the board they are using TA.
Yeah, and very, very few people are actually using or look into fundamental at all. But at the end of this session, I would let me explain and tell you why fundamental analysis is very, very important and especially when your account is growing larger and larger. All right. So now, one of the most frequently asked question by traders is that whether should we start trading FCPO using technical analysis only, or using fundamental analysis, or you need to start both together as well. So let's say if you're not quite familiar with fundamental analysis yet, so can you imagine how far you can go in your trading or not? And if you do use fundamental analysis, then what are the things you need to look at when trading? What are the fundamental things you need to look at? So in this session, I'm going to share with you some of the key things that is important when you need to look on the fundamental analysis. So right now, in this session, our primary focus will be on the fundamental analysis aspect of it. Whereas for technical analysis, so if there's opportunity next time, then I will be sharing some of the things on technical analysis. And if we have other speakers speaking on the TA related subjects as well, you can look into it too. So at the end of the session, I will be sharing with you whether you can actually, skip fundamental analysis and start trading FCPO, or whether you need to actually use fundamental analysis or combine with technical analysis to trade as well. All right. So this webinar, I'm going to organize this into three different small topics. So the first topic is actually what exactly is the crude palm oil. Now, you may or may not know or fully understand what is crude palm oil yet. So in this topic, I'm going to give you a clear understanding about CPO and certain things that you might not know or you may misunderstood what actually is CPO. So I'm going to reveal it to you later. And next is actually on topic number 2, where we will get into the core thing, which is today's topic, on the 5 fundamental factors that affect FCPO price. So if you understand these 5 fundamental factors, you would not be facing any difficulties when you trade FCPO, right? So I repeat, if you actually understand these 5 fundamental factors, right, you would not be facing too much of the difficulties when you trade FCPO, so that you have the necessary confidence to trade it. And lastly, which is on the topic 3, where I'm going to share with you some of the basic trading strategies using fundamental analysis. We are going to put together based on the actual market and some examples that, if you're actually reading certain news, how are you going to interpret those news and trade based on the news itself? So we are going to practice it on a few real life examples so you can better understand how to apply fundamental analysis in your trading. So although today's topic, I believe, it might sound or look dry for you, but it's, believe me, it is very, very, and it's really important for you if especially you want to trade for the long term. And if you trade without fundamental analysis, right, can you imagine how far you can go in your trading journey? So now this is it. You can slowly pick up and learn fundamental analysis. And at the end of the session, I would highlight whether fundamental analysis is really, really important for you or not. But keep an open mind to learn what are the things that fundamental that is affecting the price. Because when you use technical analysis, what you see is actually a price chart volume and those things, right? Fundamental analysis is actually the story behind all those price that is happening. Okay, so let's move on to topic number 1. What exactly is crude palm oil? Now, first question that I would like to ask you is that, are there any differences in 3 of these things? Okay, there is oil palm, there is palm oil, and there is another one which is the crude palm oil. Can you let me know whether there is any difference between oil palm oil as well as crude palm oil or not? Because sometimes you may hear people talking about oil palm, sometimes people talking about palm oil, while some other time you may hear people speaking about crude palm oil or CPO. So can you let me know whether they are actually the same thing or actually a different thing? Or do you know what are the differences or not? So my question to you is, are they the same or not? If it is the same, you type in the same, or if it is different, you type in no, so that we can know what it actually really is. You know, sometimes when it comes to similar words, right, we know definitely it's different, but we feel that it's different, but we don't really know what exactly the difference is. So later on, I'm going to, you know, reveal it to you what is actually the difference, so that you have a clear picture what product that you're actually trading. Okay, because sometimes in language, when we change the sequence of the words, it may still referring the same thing, but for some words, when the sequence are different, it refers to entirely different thing as well, right? So, all right, I see most people say, some of you say yes, same, some of you say different, right? Actually, let me tell you this, the answer is all three of them is actually not the same, okay? All three of these things is actually entirely different. It's not the same thing. Now, the next question is, do you know which of these is actually the three or not? Do you know which of these three, among of all of these three items, which of these is actually the three? And which of it is actually oil? Do you know which of it? So I see some of you put palm oil is actually three, some put oil palm is actually three, but what is actually three, all right? Because when it comes to this palm oil product, some people may get a little bit confused in it, what you're actually trading. Now, the answer is actually this. Oil palm refers to the exact three, all right? And palm oil and crude palm oil is actually the physical, the liquid oil that you are trading. So palm oil, the middle one, this thing is actually the category, it categorizes the whole everything about palm oil, okay? It is not specific. Whereas for the crude palm oil, the CPO, it is the first process that has been extracted out, the first oil process where it has been extracted out. So in palm oil, for this one, there are a lot of palm oil products. Later on, I'm going to share with you what are the palm oil products that we have in the market. Now, let's go into the next thing, which is the crude palm oil futures. So as you know, the crude palm oil futures, whenever you listen to this FCPO, right, or the word CPO, I believe some of you misunderstood that you're actually trading the whole fruit, right? But in fact, it is not, okay? So you see this picture, right? Most of the time when we look at the advertisement news, they show the palm oil tree or the oil palm tree picture. But in fact, this is not the product that you are trading, okay? The actual product that you are trading is actually this glass jar, this orange liquid. So this is actually the crude palm oil that you are trading. You are actually trading the palm oil, the liquid form, okay? It's not the fruit. Now, on this, do you know what are the differences between the commodities as well as the financial assets or not? Because this thing is actually very, very important, because as earlier I mentioned before, FKLI and FCPO is entirely different category of things. So one thing you need to understand is that FCPO is actually considered a different asset class. FCPO is considered as a commodities. So here we can see that there are actually the commodities asset class is actually entirely different from the financial asset class. So financial asset class are like, you know, those equity, those stocks or shares that you trade in the share stock market. And FKLI is actually considered financial assets as well. It's considered an equity asset class. Whereas for FCPO, it is actually commodities. Now, the key point that I want to highlight to you why this slide is actually very important is that you cannot treat FCPO just like FKLI, because they are entirely different. Why different? Well, if you treat FCPO just like the shares in the stock market, then when you analyze the demand and supply factors, when you analyze the fundamental factors, your direction of analysis may be incorrect, because FCPO is considered as commodity asset class, while FKLI and stocks are considered as financial assets or equity asset class. So the demand and supply factor behind are very, very different. Later, I will go in depth to share with you the key fundamental factors in analyzing FCPO. All right, can follow? Good. Now, before we go into the actual fundamental factors, you need to understand that the palm oil is actually the oil palm is actually the tree. So the palm oil or the fruit will be growing on a tree, right? So after you harvest the fruit, so this is actually the fresh fruit bunch, or in other words, we call it abbreviation, the FFB. So this whole thing is the fruit. And each of these fruit, as you can see, that it consists of a lot of palm oil seed, right? And when you cut the palm oil seed into half, inside, you can see there are two things. One thing is the seed, which is the kernel, and the next thing is actually the mesocarp, which is the flesh, the meat. So crude palm oil is actually coming out from the mesocarp, the meat, the flesh itself, right? So when mentioning about palm oil, because of the word oil, right, first thing that comes into most people's mind is that the first picture that comes into their mind is actually cooking oil. Well, most people misunderstood that the palm oil can be actually not just only to use cooking oil to cook food. In fact, many of our daily life products have palm oil ingredients inside of it as well. So here you can see that a lot of food and beverages has palm oil, something that you might not know. So for example, can you see Milo here? So the Milo that you drink has a palm oil ingredient inside as well. So don't believe about it. Well, you can go look at your Milo package and see what are the ingredients menu there, right? So in short, palm oil, we use a lot of palm oil as our ingredients in a lot of our products, especially food and beverages. It consists about close to 60 to 70% of the crude palm oil production actually used on food and beverages. And the rest would be used on personal care products, cleaning products, as well as cosmetic and some other chemicals, right? Now, when it comes to palm oil and other products, first thing we know that, all right, palm oil, we use palm oil as one of the ingredients to produce some other form of products, right? So this is where we begin with the end product. So this is where we will be having our consumer products here. Now, let's start from the fruit itself, where we have our FFB, and then we slowly move on to see what are other palm oil products that is out there, and what are we actually trading in Bursa Malaysia derivative. All right, so let's begin. So first, when you have your fruit, and after you have to go through a milling process, right? So you will have two things to get the palm oil juice or the liquid form oil out from it. So the first one is actually from the seed, which is the crude kernel oil, and the next thing is actually your crude palm oil. And after this, because it is crude, right, so it can still be further refined as well as go through refining process. So let me bring you roughly go through a quick process and see what are the products that you can have out from crude palm oil. So after crude palm oil, after refined, you will have RBD palm oil. It is called a refined, bleached, and deodorized palm oil. And you can further, refine into another two products, which is palm olein as well as palm stearine. So same thing goes for your palm kernel oil, the oil from the seed itself. So you can further refine into same thing. You can further refine into these other products as well. And all of these end product, it can further be extracted the essence out from all this oil, which is the chemicals or specialty fats out from all of these oils. So all of these things behind here would be further processed into our food and beverages and some other daily life products that we use. Now, one thing that you need to know about this is that, do you know which product that you are actually trading or not? Now, the product that we are actually trading in Bursa Malaysia derivative, okay, Malaysia derivative exchange, is that we are actually trading this crude palm oil, all right? So we are trading this product. So other products, we don't care about it. So of course, other products, it has its own fundamental factors that affect it. So for this session, to avoid confusion, all you need to focus on, even as you trade crude palm oil, right? You just need to focus on the fundamental factors that actually directly affect this crude palm oil, okay? Now, let's move on to the next topic, which is on topic 2, the 5 fundamental factors you need to look when trading FCPO. And before we end with the session, we will be having topic number 3, which is the basic trading strategy when you use fundamental analysis, where we are going to apply what we have learned today to analyze the market based on the actual market scenario. So let's move on to the first thing. What are the 5 fundamental factors? So remember earlier, I mentioned that, if you want to go further in your trading, so it is necessary for you to equip yourself with a fundamental analysis. So pay attention to this. Now, fundamental analysis is important because having the knowledge in this area allows you to understand what is actually happening behind the price chart. And this is something technical analysis doesn't have. So let's look at what are the 5 fundamental factors that we have. So the first thing is on demand and supply. Second is on the MPOB data. The third factor, export and import tax. Fourth factor, the edible oils. And the last one is on the seasonality. So certain fundamental things you might not be aware of that is actually influencing the FCPO price movement, and I'm going to highlight it out for you later. So later on, as I go through each and every factors in detail, you will be surprised that, especially factor number 5 on the seasonality. So on seasonality, do you know that based on, seasonality itself, it has certain patterns that, we traders can take into consideration on, and gives us some good advantage in trading the FCPO market. So later on, I'm going to disclose it all to you. So now let's go into the first demand and supply factor. What are the things that you need to look at? And when it comes to demand and supply, this demand and supply is actually very different from the stock market, because remember, FCPO is the commodity futures. So let's get into it and see what is the demand and supply for FCPO. So of course, when we mention about the 2 forces that affect the market, it is purely basic economics, demand and supply that affect the market. But do you understand the fundamental factors? Where does the demand comes from for FCPO? Where does the supply comes from? So this is actually a more detailed and a thorough question. So here in FCPO, now we're talking about the fundamental factors. This demand and supply is actually not from traders, okay? This is actually from the commercials as well as the producers, the main participants of FCPO market. So let's talk about the demand first. So demand is actually basically what we know is buyers, right? And those buyers are actually commercials. So commercials are actually those who need the CPO product as their raw materials in their business to produce some other end product to sell. So usually these are demand, those commercials are actually palm oil refiners or oleochemical plants who need the CPO to refine and extract chemicals from CPO, and then they sell it out. And commercials, they are concerned about CPO price because it is their raw material cost, and they want to buy it as low as possible. But if the FCPO price is really high, they don't mind buying it at higher price. Why? Because they are actually focusing on the end products, right? So the raw material price high is never mind, because they can, increase the end product price. And these commercials, these buyers, they are the ones who actually take the physical delivery when your future contract expire, right? So I repeat again, this particular buyer, this big buyer, they are the one when your future contract expire, they are the one who take the physical delivery of the crude palm oil. Okay, so this is on the demand section. Whereas on the supply section, which we know is actually those sellers, right, are actually those producers. So those who extract palm oil are usually, these producers, they have oil palm plantations as well. And their business is actually to produce, to extract CPO out from the fruit. and then they sell this CPO out in the market. So they deliver physical oils to those commercial buyers when a future contract expires. So producers, they want to sell their CPO price as high as possible. Of course, it depends on what is the market price, right? So as long as the price is above their production cost, so as long as there is a good profit margin, they will eventually sell in the market. Now, let's look into what are the forces behind the demand and selling forces. How does these forces affect in the market at your FCPO price? Now, when demand, this is back to the very, very basic economics 101, right? So let's say there is a high demand for your price. What would happen to your FCPO price? Can you let me know when there is high demand, what would happen to your FCPO price? Will it go up or will it actually come down, or no changes in your price at all? Right? So I see most of you put price is going up. That's right. You're correct. Because when there is demand or rising demand, generally, based on economic theories, that price will definitely goes up. So let's look at the opposite thing, which is on the supply. What happens when there is, there is increase in supply in the market, which means, supply is getting more and more, where you are unable to sell it out. What happens when your supply is increasing? You have more supply in the market. So what happens to your FCPO price? So I see most of you put drop or when the price comes down, right? That's correct as well, because when there is excess supply or when your supply is more than demand, generally what we can expect is that the FCPO price to come down. So this is on the first factor, your demand and supply factor. Now let's go on to the second factor, which is your MPOB data. So do you know where to get your crude palm oil related data or not? Or do you actually, wait for the news media to publish the news next day? Or do you wait for your, your futures broker report to produce an analyst report to come out the next day? So MPOB data is something where you can be a little bit faster in getting the data. So usually news will publish the data would be, slightly one day a little bit later or a few hours later. So if you want to be a little bit faster, you can look at the MPOB data. And this MPOB data, there are only 3 data that you need to take note on. So let's go into it. So you can look at this website. This is the MPOB data. You can copy this address or take this screenshot down so that you are able to find where to get this address, because on the main website, MPOB website, there are too many links inside. So you can directly go into this sublink to look at, to find the actual data inside, right? So MPOB stands for Malaysia Palm Oil Board. So it is a government agency that is, they will track all of those business activities related to palm oil. So do you know when and where to get this data or not? Each and every month, on the 10th of every month, they will publish important palm oil data on this website. So each and every month at the 10th of every month by 12:30 p.m. noon. So the data will be released on this website, and you can find it from one of these columns here, right? So the most important thing is 3 data that we need to look at, which is your data on production, your stocks inventory, as well as your import-export data. So let's move into how does all this data affects your price movement. Now, the first thing, back to the very fundamental factor, which is the earlier factor number 1, which is on demand and supply. So here we can, categorize it into a more specific and detailed thing. So there are supply factors as well as demand factors. So on the first one, on supply factor is actually on the CPO production. So this CPO production is actually not your oil palm tree or the fruit production. Okay, this is actually your CPO, the oil production as well. So the first thing, so let's say if your CPO production is actually higher, what does that mean? It means that your producer is actually producing more, so there will be even more supply in the market, right? So generally, back to our demand and supply theory, when there is more supply in the theory, generally FCPO price would have to, we expect the price to come down. Now, this is on the general aspect on it. So on the second data, which is your stock as well as your inventory. So the stock here is actually not the stock market, not the stock in the stock market, right? The stock here refers to your inventory. So how much stock that is available in your warehouse. So let's say you produce crude palm oil, right? And when you cannot sell it out, the excess one, you will keep those things back into your warehouse, correct? So this is actually on the inventory, the stock. So now, let's say if the stock is getting higher and higher, and this is where, when producers keep producing and they are unable to sell it out. So which is why they need to keep more in the warehouse, correct? So what does it actually mean? Can you let me know what would you expect the FCPO price, whether is it going to go up or whether is it going to go down? Okay, my question is this: when you have a lot of stock in your warehouse, what does it even mean? Okay, basic common sense is that, I see most of you, in fact, all of you put it down. So that's correct. When you have too many stock in your warehouse, which means you cannot get rid of your stocks, right? So this is where you generally price would need to come down. Even producers, they have to sell it at lower price, right? Because producers, their main concern is actually, their business is actually selling the crude palm oil, right? So this is where you can see, they want to do stock clearance. They need to clear off their inventory. They need to clear off their stocks. So this is where you can see, they want money, they don't want stock. Okay, they want money, they don't want stock. They will need to lower down their price to sell it out in the market so that they can clear off the inventory. Now, on the third important data from MPOB is actually on the export. So export considered as your demand factor. So Malaysia is actually the second largest exporter for CPO after Indonesia, and we are the producer for CPO. So that's why we sell CPO and we export it out from our country. So let's say when the export is higher, what does it actually mean? Now, back to demand factor, export higher means demand is getting higher. There is a rising demand. So higher demand means price is expected to go up higher. So these are the three important MPOB data that you need to take note of, and the cause and effect. When production goes up, what would be expected price? When export is going up, what is the expected price that is going to happen in the market? Okay, so this is on factor number 2, MPOB data. Now, let's go on to the third factor, which is your export and import tax. Speaking about tax, so sometimes when trading FCPO, right, you want to look throughout the news, you want to look the word tax, the tax word, T-A-X, tax. So this is a little bit tricky because sometimes the news media or sometimes during analyst report, right, they might not use the word tax. They might use some other different words. So sometimes you might not be aware of the news changes or updates in the market. So let me tell you this. There are three words that is similar to tax. So the first word is tax, export and import tax. The second word is actually tariff. So we can also refer this as export and import tariff. And the third word is duty, export and import duty. So these three words can be used interchangeably. Tariff, tax, as well as duty. Okay. Now, as we know that the largest CPO producing country is actually Indonesia number 1 and Malaysia number 2, and the largest consumer or the largest CPO consuming country are actually China and India. So we producers we need to focus on the export. We are the one that's selling, and the consumer are actually those are the people who import those goods, and they are the ones who buy from either Indonesia or buy from us, Malaysia. So let's look at the quick data here. So here we can see that Indonesia and Malaysia is actually the largest producer in the world for this crude palm oil. And because we are the largest producer, so here we can see on the export section, we are the biggest exporter, same as Indonesia as well. And our consumer or our buyer, those who buy CPO from us, is actually India and China, where these two main participants, these two main consumers are very, very important towards whether your CPO price is going up or whether your CPO price is going down. So let's look at the impact on import and export tax. Now, first thing, again, we can go on to split this into a little bit detail, which is on supply as well as demand factor. So first thing on the supply factor, because we are the producers, right? So we export our CPO out from Malaysia. So we export. So let's say if your export tax for FCPO increase, what would happen and what does it actually mean to the price? Now, you need to remember this thing, very simple, okay? This factor would be very simple, tax ma. So when it comes to tax, first thing you come into mind is that, oh, expensive. So higher tax, well, when there is tax means things are actually more expensive. Lower tax means your price, your product would be even cheaper. So when the import tax is actually higher, so generally your FCPO price would be lower. Okay, we can expect FCPO price to come down. Because why? Because your product price are getting higher, correct? So this is where buyers are, a little bit reluctant to buy more from you. They want to slow down their purchase. So when they slow down their purchase, when they slow down their demand for your product, there will be more supply than demand. So this is where the price would come down. So same thing goes for the import factor as well. The biggest consumer or the biggest importer is actually China and India. And when the import tax is rising, so import tax rising means those buyers, right, when they buy in, the product's price would be even more expensive. So it is the same thing as export. You need to remember this thing is, tax. Tax means your product would be more expensive, correct? So it's very easy where, nobody likes tax to increase, correct? So tax increase means your product price would be higher, would be more expensive, and it discourages buyer to buy more. So demand would be lower, and therefore your price would be lower as well. Now, on the fourth factor, which is on your edible oil. So why do we need to know about edible oils when you treat FCPO? Because FCPO is a commodity, right? And it can be substituted by some other comparable oil products. So it is important for you to know who are the competitors out there for your FCPO product. For example, right, if you want to go after a girl, you need to know who is your competitor. You need to know who is your rival, correct? So it is important to know who are the competitor for FCPO product as well. Now, let's have a quick look on this data, where you can see there are so many edible oils, which is the vegetable oils. So all of these are plant-based oils. So here we can see there are a list of oils that is actually available in the international market. And here we can see that palm oil is we are actually having the biggest production in the world in total. And of course, imports also has a higher number, and same thing for export as well. So when it comes to edible oil, it is not just only palm oil. There are some other oil that can be used as a substitute as well. So let's say substitute means something that is replaceable. So let's say if you want to eat fried chicken, right? So which one do you go? Of course, the first thing is that you might think of, KFC is your first choice, right? What happens if, KFC is closed down, or if KFC is more expensive? Which fried chicken restaurant would you go? You may go to Texas Chicken, correct? So same thing goes to if you want to eat bread. Gardenia, if you do not like Gardenia, you can go for Massimo. Or if there is no more Massimo bread, you can go for Gardenia. So this is what we mean by replaceable or substitutable. So here we can see palm oil is the largest production in the world, and the next largest production of vegetable oil is actually soybean oil. So let me simplify it for you, since this table is too many figures, right? So let me simplify this for you in terms of let's look at the pie chart alone for year 2019 and year 2020. So here we can see that on the production level, palm oil consists of 37% of the global world supply, and the next biggest oil that we use is actually soybean oil. So soybean oil would be our, greatest competitor, the close competitor for palm oil. So if people do not want to use palm oil, right, they can choose to use soybean oil. If palm oil is too expensive, people would switch to soybean oil. Or if soybean oil is too expensive, people would switch to palm oil. But you don't have to worry about this because palm oil mainly serve the Asian market, Asian, Middle East, as well as the European market. And soybean oil is actually serving the Western America as well as Latin American market. So we still have the geographical advantages towards it. Now, this image is actually for your general knowledge understanding only. So here we can see that for palm oil as well as soybean oil. So let's go on to the first one on the palm oil, where you can see we just only need to use 6% of the global land to produce so much palm oil. We have 36% of the production oil in the world is actually on palm oil. And the next thing on soybean, they use more land, but they produce lesser. So which is why generally soybean oil would be a little bit more expensive than palm oil. Now, on this chart, you can see that, because palm oil and soybean oil is quite closely interrelated, right? So this is where you can see the price. Usually both of them are using at the same question, and they would facing the same direction. When palm oil goes up, soybean oil goes up as well. When soybean oil goes down, palm oil will generally goes down as well, because both of them are the similar and very close substitutable product. Now, on last one, this is the surprising thing that you might not know yet, or the seasonality. So do you know that seasonality has certain patterns that we can take advantage of as a trader? And let's look into it. Now, when it comes to commodities, there are several seasonal patterns that you as a trader can take advantage of. So seasonality is very simple. Let me explain it to you. Now, for example, let's say our Malaysia weather. There are certain periods they are so hot and dry, and there are certain periods it is a raining period. For example, currently we are in a raining season, raining period, right? So let's look at this diagram. And this diagram is actually taken from Bloomberg Terminal. And here we can see there are a lot of reds and greens, right? Red color means the particular whole month, the price is actually moving up higher. And green means whole month price going up higher. Red means the whole month price is actually going down lower. So on here, on the x-axis, here we can see it's actually on the month from January to the right up till December. And next thing is actually on your y-axis is your year, from year 2011 up till current year 2021. So on seasonality, some seasons the production is lower, some seasons the export is higher, and some seasons there would be strong demand from those commercial buyers. So you can expect the FCPO price to be even higher. So from this diagram itself, can you see, probably you may have already realized there are some seasonal patterns in it, right? So here we can see, let me highlight one or two things that is very important here. Now, here you can see that in each and every year, right, for January as well as April, generally, most of the time they will be having a red color. So what it means is that at the end of the month, so which means the whole month, right, is actually trending downwards for usually first half of the year. So this is the first thing that I want to highlight on. And the next thing is that can you see that, the second half, the average 10 years here is actually all green color, where, the second half of the year is actually having an uptrend. So the third thing that I want to highlight here is that, can you see from October to November on average, there is a 5%, 1.7%, 1.2%, as well as 4%, where you can see here, most of the time it is actually all green each and every year. These 3 months would be having more green than red. So here, from the seasonality perspective, you can look into it as traders where you can take advantage of this pattern that are advantageous to you. And you can also avoid patterns that are actually harmful to you. So this is the thing for seasonality. Now, there you have it, the 5 important fundamentals you need to look on when trading FCPO. And of course, these 5 fundamental factors, it is not exhaustive. There are still more fundamental factors that actually influence the direction and FCPO price movement. And in fact, these 5 fundamental factors, each of them can be studied in a greater depth as well as detail. So when you have time, you can slowly study this in detail according to your interest as well as your own preference, okay? Now, let's go into the last topic, which is how are you going to use the basic strategy to apply the fundamental analysis in trading the FCPO market. So here we are going to apply what we have learned today to analyze the actual market scenario. So there are 3 simple steps that you can do to use fundamental analysis to trade or to analyze. So the first one is actually step number 1. You need to identify which is the influential side, whether this factor is actually a demand factor or whether this is actually a supply factor. And let's say you have already identified the demand factor. So now let's go on to step 2, where whether this demand factor, what is its impact? Is it a positive impact or whether is it a negative impact? So when you are able to know, let's say it's a positive impact, then what would you expect the FCPO price would be? Whether is it going up or whether is it going to trend down? So this is the 3 simple steps. It is actually a very simple checklist process for you, how you are going to analyze the FCPO market using fundamental analysis. Okay, so you need to remember these 3 simple steps. So let's go on with a few examples. So example number 1, this is actually based on the actual market. It has already happened before. So if your FCPO inventories in Malaysia contracted about 24% from a month earlier to 1.18 million tons at the end of December. So here we can, let me highlight the important keywords for you. So the first one is CPO inventories. The next keyword is contracted. Now, let's go through the 3 simple steps. We need to follow closely these 3 steps, okay? Pay attention carefully. Now, you need to identify what is the influential side, whether is it demand or supply. So here we are already able to identify, okay, it is CPO inventories, and inventories is actually stock, correct? And this inventory is considered as, well, it is a supply factor. It is not demand factor, but it is directly related to supply factor. Now, step number 2, you need to determine whether what is its impact, whether is it positive or negative. So here we have already highlighted out the keyword here, which is the contracted, and some other synonymous word that generally people would use is actually reduced, shrunk, or dropped. So here we can know that the stock is actually, or the inventory is actually coming down. Now, what would be the last step is that what can you expect for the FCPO price? Is it going to go up or is it going to come down? So can you let me know whether based on these 3 simple steps, step number 3, what is the expectation from the FCPO market? Whether is it going to go up or whether is it going to go down, and why is it going to go up or down? Now, here we can interpret this as, when stock is inventory level comes down, means that, your warehouse is getting lesser and less stock, right? Even if you have a production, your inventory in your warehouse still getting lower. So what it means is that your supply getting lower, and it also means that the price, tentatively, yes, most of you are getting it correctly, where lower supply means your price is going to go up. So here can you relate to what you have learned earlier on? Even factor number 1 is very, very important by just looking at the demand and supply. Now, second example is that, let's say when India has raised its import tax on crude palm oil to 44% from 37% as the world's largest palm oil importer, where they try to boost their local oilseed production. So let's find what are the keywords here. Now, keywords, two keywords here is actually on import tax raised to 44% from 37%. So let's go through the three simple steps again. Now, what are the influential sites? So here we have already found out it's an import tax. And what factor it is it demand factor or is it supply factor? So we know import tax is actually demand because they buy from us, correct? Now, step number two is we need to know what is its impact, whether is it positive or negative. So earlier on, I've already shared with you, tax is very simple because higher tax means things is going to get more expensive. So if things are expensive, what would you do? So you need to think, even us as consumers, right? Think when things is expensive, when there is higher tax, generally, of course, our price expectation is that, we would not want to buy so much or we want to slow down our purchase. So this is where there is a lower demand. And there you have it. I think you get it correctly. Price generally to go down. Tax higher means price goes down. And the opposite is true when tax is getting lower. We are happy with lower tax, right? Lower tax means we have more money. More money means you can, with the same money, we can buy even more. So this is on the tax portion. So there you have it. 5 fundamental factors and a simple example of how you are going to trade using FCPO or using fundamental analysis to trade your FCPO. Now, let's come back to this question of, whether you should start with fundamental analysis or whether you should start with technical analysis. So early on, I believe most of you mentioned that you use technical analysis to trade the market, right? And of course, a lot of people, and especially a lot of technical traders, they don't generally they don't believe or they put very less weight on fundamental analysis. So let me tell you why fundamental analysis is important. And should you start with fundamental analysis or should you start with technical analysis to begin your FCPO trading? Now, on fundamental analysis, as we have already gone through, right? Although this session will be, we've gone through a very brief, but each and every factors we can still go into very, very deep and detailed into it. So this is why we can see fundamental analysis. It takes a little bit longer time to learn, and you need to spend a lot of time. You need to spend a little bit effort to gather information, and it takes time for you to analyze, to think. And because it takes time, right, you can actually take your time to slowly learn. Okay, don't okay, after this session, it doesn't mean that I say I did not mention fundamental analysis is important. Fundamental analysis is still very important, but you can take your time to slowly learn. And as time goes, your knowledge of fundamental analysis would keep growing and develop to be better. Now, whereas for technical analysis, the most important thing is that as long as you have a well-defined trading plan and trading strategies, okay, technical analysis can trade, but you need to have a well-defined trading plan and trading strategies. And you can make trading decisions by just a technical analysis alone for starters. So, because most of you use technical analysis, and the most important thing for us as trader is that it is not so much on technical analysis, it is not so much on fundamental analysis. Personally, which I believe is that as traders, the most important thing is actually making decisions. Don't get stuck on analysis level. Most people, analyze too much but still haven't made decision yet, correct? So the most important thing is make a quick and fast decision. So you can start with technical analysis so that you can make your decision a little bit faster, because fundamental analysis takes a little bit time for you to gather information, analyze, and then it makes your decision process a little bit slower. So for starters, if your trading capital or your trading position, your lot size, right, is small, in fact, you can start trading with technical analysis. It is actually more than enough because your purpose is actually to trade and to make quick and fast decisions. But one thing you need to take note of is that if you want to progress and go very far in your trading journey, if you want to trade more, of course, trading more means your profit growing, right? Your trading account is getting larger. Your trading position would be growing as well. So having a good knowledge in fundamental analysis it is very, very important as well, especially if you want to go further. Okay, I repeat, fundamental analysis, it is still very, very important, especially if your trading account and your trading position is getting larger and larger. You definitely need to look at fundamental analysis. And if you want to go very far in your trading, which is a very, very good thing, having a good knowledge in fundamental analysis is important. And of course, from right now today, even if you're still using technical analysis to trade, you can continue to do what you're doing, and you can slowly take your time to develop the knowledge of fundamentals, study more on economics, and read a little bit more, so that as time goes by, you build your knowledge, your skills, your understanding about what are the fundamentals that affects the market. Okay, so that when you trade larger, when your trading account is bigger, you have the confidence to, you have the rock solid confidence to hold your trade, because trading one lot as compared to trading 10 lots, 20 lots is different trading psychology, correct? So which is why when you trade larger, right, you really, really need fundamental analysis to have the necessary confidence to hold you, to guide you in terms of your trade. All right, so there you have it. Let me end with this, where the 5 important things that you need to know is that I've mentioned there is a difference between oil palm and palm oil, which is tree and which is oil. And FCPO is actually one of the commodity asset class. It is entirely different from FKLI. So the way how you study FKLI is actually different from FCPO. It requires different set of skills as well as different set of knowledge to understand and trade FCPO. Okay. And third thing is that you have already seen the palm oil and its components, as well as what other products that palm oil has. And we are actually just only trading crude palm oil. Okay, so other palm oil products, it is not important, and you do not need to spend your time too much on learning some other palm oil products, because those are very indirect factors that affect you. And we have already gone through the 5 fundamental factors that affect FCPO price, and it starts with demand and supply, and as we progress, it can build up into a deeper and further knowledge in fundamentals. And lastly, you have also already learned what are the basic trading strategies using fundamental factors, using the 3 simple steps. So there you have it. That's all for my sharing today. And one last thing is that we need to focus on our trading process, because ultimately in your trading, decision making is more important than analysis. Analysis is something that is no matter how you do, right, you still need to go through analysis process, but ultimately you still need to make a decision whether to buy, sell, or do nothing. So focus on your trading process, and a profit or loss, the result will definitely take care of itself. And if you would like to learn more about FCPO or some other trading knowledge, you can go through our Facebook as well as our YouTube channel. We will be posting videos quite regularly. And that's it for today. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, you can type on the question box.